Joy in the Morning by P.G. Wodehouse. Read by Jonathan Cecil. Part 1. Chapter 1. After the thing was over, when peril had ceased to loom, and happy endings had been distributed in heaping handfuls, and we were driving home with our hats on the side of our heads, having shaken the dust of Steeple Bumpleigh from our tires, I confessed to Jeeves that there had been moments during the recent proceedings when Bertie Wooster, though no weakling, had come very near to despair. Within a toucher, Jeeves. Unquestionably, affairs had developed a certain menacing trend, sir. I saw no ray of hope. It looked to me as if the bluebird had thrown in the towel and formally ceased to function. And yet here we are, all bumps-a-daisy. Makes one think a bit, that. Yes, sir. There's an expression on the tip of my tongue which seems to me to sum the whole thing up. Or rather, when I say an expression, I mean a saying, a wheeze, a gag, what I believe is called a saw. Something about joy doing something. Joy cometh in the morning, sir. That's the baby. Not one of your things, is it? No, sir. Well, it's dashed good, I said. And I still think that there could be no neater way of putting in a nutshell the outcome of the super-sticky affair of Nobby Hopwood, Stilton Cheesewright, Florence Cray, my Uncle Percy, J. Chichester Clam, Edwin the Boy Scout, and old Boko Fittleworth, or, as my biographers will probably call it, the Steeple Bumpleigh Horror. Even before the events occurred which I am about to relate, the above hamlet had come high up in my list of places to be steered sedulously clear of. I don't know if you have ever seen one of those old maps where they mark a spot with a cross and put, "Here be dragons," or "Keep ye eyes skinned for hippogriffs," but I had always felt that some such kindly warning might well have been given to pedestrians and traffic with regard to this Steeple Bumpleigh. A picturesque settlement, yes, none more so in all Hampshire. It lay embowered, as I believe the expression is, in the midst of smiling fields and leafy woods, hard by a willow-fringed river, and you couldn't have thrown a brick in it without hitting a honeysuckle-covered cottage or beaning an apple-cheeked villager. But you remember what the fellow said. It's not a bally bit of use every prospect pleasing if man is vile. And the catch about Steeple Bumpleigh was that it contained Bumpleigh Hall, which in its turn contained my Aunt Agatha and her second husband. And when I tell you that this second H was none other than Percival Lord Worplesdon, and that he had with him his daughter Florence and his son Edwin, the latter as pestilential a stripling as ever wore khaki shorts and went spooring, or whatever it is that these Boy Scouts do, you will understand why I had always declined my old pal Boko Fittleworth's invitations to visit him at the bijou residence he maintained in those parts. I had also had to be similarly firm with Jeeves, who had repeatedly hinted his wish that I should take a cottage there for the summer months. There was, it appeared, admirable fishing in the river, and he is a man who dearly loves to flick the baited hook. No, Jeeves, I had been compelled to say, much though it pains me to put a stopper on your simple pleasures, I cannot take the risk of running into that gang of plug-uglies. Safety first. And he had replied, "Very good, sir," and there the matter had rested. But all the while, unsuspected by Bertram, the shadow of Steeple Bumpleigh was creeping nearer and nearer, and came a day when it tore off its whiskers and pounced. Oddly enough, the morning on which this major disaster occurred was one that found me completely, even exuberantly, in the pink. No inkling of the soup into which I was to be plunged came to mar my perfect bien-être. I had slept well, shaved well, and shower-bathed well, and it was with a merry cry that I greeted Jeeves as he brought in the coffee and kippers. "Odds bodikins, Jeeves," I said, "I am in rare fettle this a.m. Talk about exulting in my youth. I feel up and doing with a heart for any fate, as Tennyson says." "Longfellow, sir. Or, if you prefer it, Longfellow. I am in no mood to split hairs. Well, what's the news?" "Miss Hopwood called while you were still asleep, sir." "No, really? I wish I'd seen her." "The young lady
was desirous of entering your room and rousing you with a wet sponge, but I dissuaded her. I considered it best that your repose should not be disturbed."
I applauded this watchdog spirit, showing as it did both the kindly heart and the feudal outlook, but continued to tut-tut a bit at having missed the young pipsqueak, with whom my relations had always been of the matiest. This Zenobia, Nobby Hopwood, was old Worplesdon's ward, as I believe it's called. A pal of his, just before he stopped ticking over some years previously, had left him in charge of his daughter. I don't know how these things are arranged. No doubt documents have to be drawn up and dotted lines signed on, but whatever the procedure, the upshot was as I have stated. When all the smoke had cleared away, my Uncle Percy was Nobby's guardian. "Young Nobby, eh? When did she blow into the great city?" I asked. For, on becoming Uncle Percy's ward, she had, of course, joined the strength at his Steeple Bumpleigh lair, and it was only rarely nowadays that she came to London.
"Last night, sir."
"Making a long stay?"
"Only till tomorrow, sir."
"Hardly worthwhile sweating up just for a day, I should have thought."
"I understand that she came because her ladyship desired her company, sir."
I quailed a bit. "You don't mean Aunt Agatha's in London?"
"Merely passing through, sir," replied the honest fellow, calming my apprehensions. "Her ladyship is on her way to minister to Master Thomas, who has contracted mumps at his school."
His allusion was to the old relative's son by her first marriage, one of our vilest citizens. Many good judges rank him even higher in England's rogue gallery than her stepson Edwin. I was rejoiced to learn that he had got mumps, and toyed for a moment with a hope that Aunt Agatha would catch them from him. And what had Nobby to say for herself?
She was regretting that she saw so little of you nowadays, sir."
"Quite mutual, the agony, Jeeves. There are few better eggs than this Hopwood."
"She expressed a hope that you might shortly see your way to visiting Steeple Bumpleigh."
I shook the head. "Out of the queue, Jeeves."
"The young lady tells me the fish are biting well there just now."
"No, Jeeves, I'm sorry. Not even if they bite like serpents do I go near Steeple Bumpleigh."
"Very good, sir."
He spoke somberly, and I endeavoured to ease the strain by asking for another cup of coffee. "Was Nobby alone?"
"No, sir. There was a gentleman with her, who spoke as if he were acquainted with you. Miss Hopwood addressed him as Stilton."
"Big chap?"
"Noticeably well developed, sir."
"With a head like a pumpkin?"
"Yes, sir. There was a certain resemblance to the vegetable."
"It must have been a companion of my earlier years named G. Darcy Cheesewright. In our whimsical way, we used to call him Stilton. I haven't seen him for ages. He lives in the country somewhere, and to hobnob with Bertie Wooster, it is imperative that you stick around the metropolis. Odd, him knowing Nobby."
"I gathered from the young lady's remarks that Mr. Cheesewright is also a resident of Steeple Bumpleigh, sir."
"Really? It's a small world, Jeeves."
"Yes, sir."
"I don't know when I've seen a smaller," I said, and would have gone more deeply into the subject, but at this juncture the telephone tinkled out a summons, and he shimmered off to answer it. Through the door, which he had chanced to leave ajar, the ear detected a good deal of "yes, my lording," and "very good, my lording," seeming to indicate that he had hooked one of the old nobility. "Who was it?" I asked, as he filtered in again.
"Lord Worplesdon, sir."
It seems almost incredible to me, looking back, that I should have received this news item with nothing more than a mildly surprised "O.R." Amazing, I mean, that I shouldn't have spotted the sinister way in which you might call the Steeple Bumpleigh note had begun to intrude itself like some creeping fog or miasma, and trembled in every limb, asking myself what this portended. But so it was. The significance of the thing failed to penetrate, and as I say, I O.R'd with merely a faint spot of surprise.
"The call was for me, sir. His lordship wishes me to go to his office immediately."
"He wants to see you?"
"Such was the impression I gathered, sir."
"Did he say why?"
"No, sir, merely that the matter was of considerable urgency."
I mused, thoughtfully champing a kipper. It seemed to me that there could be but one solution. Do you know what I think, Jeeves? He's in a spot of some kind, and needs your counsel.
"It may be so, sir."
"I'll bet it's so. He must know all about your outstanding gifts. You can't go on as you've gone on so long, dishing out aid and comfort to all and sundry without acquiring a certain reputation, if only in the family circle. Grab your hat and race along. I shall be all agog to learn the inside story. What sort of day is it?
Extremely clement, sir.
Sunshine and all that?
Yes, sir.
I thought as much. That must be why I'm feeling so dashed fit. Then I think I'll take myself for an airing. Tell me, I said, for I was a trifle remorseful at having had to adopt that firm attitude about going to Steeple Bumpleigh, and wished to bring back into his life the joy which my refusal to allow him to get in among the local fish had excluded from it. Is there any little thing I can do for you while I'm out?
Sir?
Any little gift you would like, I mean.
It is extremely kind of you, sir.
Not at all, Jeeves. The sky's the limit. State your desire.
Well, sir, there has recently been published a new and authoritatively annotated edition of the works of the philosopher Spinoza. Since you are so generous, I would appreciate that very much.
You shall have it. It shall be delivered to your door in a plain van without delay. You're sure you got the name right? Spinoza?
Yes, sir.
It doesn't sound probable, but no doubt you know best. Spinoza, eh? Is he the Book Society's Choice of the Month?
I believe not, sir.
Well, he's the only fellow I ever heard of who wasn't. Right-ho, I'll see to it instanter. And presently, having assembled the hat, the gloves, and the neatly rolled U, I sauntered forth. As I made my way to the bookery, I found my thoughts turning once more, as you may readily imagine, to this highly suggestive business of old Worplesdon. The thing intrigued me. I found it difficult to envisage what possible sort of a jam a man like that could have got himself into. When, about 18 months before, news had reached me through well-informed channels that my Aunt Agatha, for many years a widow, or derelict as I believe it is called, was about to take another pop at matrimony, my first emotion, as was natural in the circumstances, had been a gentle pity for the unfortunate goop slated to step up the aisle with her, she, as you are aware, being my tough aunt, the one who eats broken bottles and conducts human sacrifices by the light of the full moon. But when the details began to come in, and I discovered that the bimbo who had drawn the short straw was Lord Worplesdon, the shipping magnate, this tender commiseration became sensibly diminished. The thing I felt would be no walkover. Even if in the fullness of time she wore him down, and at length succeeded in making him jump through hoops, she would know she had been in a fight. For he was hot stuff, this Worplesdon. I had known him all my life. It was he who, at the age of 15, when I was 15, I mean, of course, found me smoking one of his special cigars in the stable yard and chased me a mile across difficult country with a hunting crop. And though with advancing years our relations had naturally grown more formal, I had never been able to think of him without getting goose pimples. Given the choice between him and a hippogriff as a companion for a walking tour, I would have picked the hippogriff every time. It was not easy to see how such a man of blood and iron could have been reduced to sending out SOSs for Jeeves, and I was reflecting on the possibility of compromising letters in the possession of gold-digging blondes when I reached my destination and started to lodge my order. Good morning, I said. I want a book." Of course, I ought to have known that it's silly to try to buy a book when you go to a bookshop. It merely startles and bewilders the inmates. The moth-eaten old bird who had stepped forward to attend to me ran true to form. "A book, sir?" he replied with ill-concealed astonishment. "Spinoza," I replied, specifying. This had him rocking back on his heels. "Did you say Spinoza, sir?" "Spinoza was what I said." He seemed to be feeling that if we talked this thing out long enough as man to man, we might eventually hit upon a formula. "You do not mean the spinning wheel?" "No." "It would not be the poisoned pin?" "It would not." "Or with gun and camera in little-known Borneo?" he queried, trying a long shot. "Spinoza," I repeated firmly. That was my story, and I intended to stick to it. He sighed a bit, like one who feels that the situation has got beyond him. "I will go and see if we have it in stock, sir. But possibly this may be what you are requiring. Said to be very clever." He pushed off, Spinoza-ing under his breath in a hopeless sort of way, leaving me clutching a thing called Spindrift. It looked pretty foul. Its jacket showed a female with a green oblong face, sniffing at a purple lily, and I was just about to fling it from me and start a hunt for that poisoned pin of which he had spoken, when I became aware of someone good gracious Bertieing, and turning, found that the animal cries proceeded from a tall girl of commanding aspect who had oiled up behind me. "Good gracious, Bertie! Is it really you?" I emitted a sharp gurgle and shied like a startled mustang. It was old Worplesdon's daughter, Florence Cray. And I'll tell you why, on beholding her, I shied and gurgled as described. I mean, if there's one thing I bar, it's the sort of story where people stagger to and fro, clutching their foreheads and registering strong emotion, and not a word of explanation as to what it's all about till the detective sums up in the last chapter. Briefly, then, the reason why this girl's popping up had got in amongst me in this fashion was that we had once been engaged to be married, and not so dashed long ago either. And though it all came out all right in the end, the thing being broken off and self saved from the scaffold at the 11th hour, it had been an extraordinarily narrow squeak, and the memory remained green. The mere mention of her name was still enough to make me call for a couple of quick ones, so you can readily appreciate my agitation at bumping into her like this, absolutely in the flesh. I swayed in the breeze, and found myself a bit stumped for the necessary dialogue. "Oh, hello," I said. Not good, of course, but the best I could do. Chapter 2. Scanning the roster of the females I've nearly got married to in my time, we find the names of some tough babies. The eye rests on that of Honoria Glossop, and a shudder passes through the frame. So it does when we turn to the B's and come upon Madeline Bassett. But taking everything into consideration and weighing this and that, I have always been inclined to consider Florence Cray the top. In the face of admittedly stiff competition, it is to her that I would award the biscuit. Honoria Glossop was hearty, yes. Her laugh was like a steam-riveting machine, and from a child she had been a confirmed backslapper. Madeline Bassett was soppy, true. She had large melting eyes, and thought the stars were God's daisy chain. These are grave defects, but to do this revolting duo justice, neither had tried to mould me, and that was what Florence Cray had done from the start, seeming to look on Bertie Wooster as a mere chunk of plasticine in the hands of the sculptor. The root of the trouble was that she was one of those intellectual girls, steeped to the gills in serious purpose, who were unable to see a male soul without wanting to get behind it and shove. We had scarcely arranged the preliminaries before she was checking up on my reading, giving the bird to Blood on the Banisters, which happened to be what I was studying at the moment, and substituting for it a thing called Types of Ethical Theory. Nor did she attempt to conceal the fact that this was a mere pipe-opener, and that there was worse to come. Have you ever dipped into Types of Ethical Theory? The volume is still on my shelves. Let us open it and see what it has to offer. Yes, here we are. Of the two antithetic terms in the Greek philosophy, one only was real and subsisting, that is to say, ideal thought, as opposed to that which it has to penetrate and mould. The other, corresponding to our nature, was in itself phenomenal, unreal, without any permanent footing, having no predicates that held true for 2 moments together. In short, redeemed from negation only by including indwelling realities appearing through. Right. You will have got the idea, and will, I think, be able to understand why the sight of her made me give at the knees somewhat. Old wounds had been reopened. None of the embarrassment which was causing the Wooster toes to curl up inside their neat suede shoes like the tendrils of some sensitive plant seemed to be affecting this chunk of the dead past. Her manner, as always, was brisk and aunt-like, even at the time when I had fallen beneath the spell of that profile of hers, which was a considerable profile, and tended to make a man commit himself to statements which he later regretted. I had always felt that she was like someone training on to be an aunt. "And how are you, Bertie?" "Oh, fine, thanks. I have just run up to London to see my publisher. Fancy meeting you, and in a bookshop of all places. What are you buying? Some trash, I suppose?" Her gaze, which had been resting on me in a rather critical and censorious way, as if she was wondering how she could ever have contemplated linking her lock to anything so subhuman, now transferred itself to the volume in my hand. She took it from me, her lip curling in faint disgust, as if she wished she had had a pair of tongs handy. And then, as she looked at it, her whole aspect suddenly altered. She switched off the curling lip. She smiled a pleased smile. The eyes softened. A blush mantled the features. She positively giggled. "Oh, Bertie." The gist got past me. "Oh, Bertie" was a thing she'd frequently said to me in the days when we had been affianced, but always said with that sort of nasty ring in the voice which made you feel she had been on the point of expressing her exasperation with something a good deal fruitier, but had remembered her ancient lineage just in time. This current "Oh, Bertie" was quite different, practically a coup, as it might have been one turtle dove addressing another turtle dove. "Oh, Bertie," she repeated. "Well, of course I must autograph it for you," she said, and at the same moment all was suddenly made clear to me. I had missed it at first, because I had been concentrating on the girl with the green face, but I now perceived, at the bottom of the jacket, the words, "By Florence Cray." They had been half hidden by a gummed-on label which said Book Society Choice of the Month. I saw all, and the thought of how near I had come to marrying a female novelist made everything go black for a bit. She wrote in the book with a firm hand, thus dishing any prospect that the shop would take it back, and putting me 7 bob and a tanner down, almost, as you might say, before the day had started. Then she said, "Well," still with that turtle-dove timbre in her voice, "fancy you buying Spindrift." Well, one has to say the civil thing, and it may be that in the agitation of the moment I overdid it a bit. I rather think that the impression I must have conveyed when I assured her that I'd made a beeline for the beastly volume was that I had been counting the minutes till I could get my hooks on it. At any rate, she came back with a gratified simper. "I can't tell you how pleased I am, not just because it's mine, but because I see that all the trouble I took training your mind was not wasted. You have grown to love good literature." It was at this point, as if he had entered on cue, that the moth-eaten bird returned and said they had not got old Pop Spinoza, but could get him for me. He seemed rather depressed about it all, but Florence's eyes lit up as if somebody had pressed a switch. "Bertie, this is amazing. Do you really read Spinoza?" It's extraordinary how one yields to that fatal temptation to swank. It undoes the best of us. Nothing, I mean, would have been simpler than to reply that she had got the data twisted, and that the authoritatively annotated edition was a present for Jeeves. But instead of doing the simple, manly, straightforward thing, I had to go and put on dog. "Oh, rather," I said, with an intellectual flick of the umbrella. "When I have a leisure moment, you will generally find me curled up with Spinoza's latest." "Well," a simple word, but as she spoke it, a shudder ran through me from brilliantine topknot to rubber shoe sole. It was the look that accompanied the yip that caused this shudder. It was exactly the same sort of look that Madeline Bassett had given me. That time I went to Totsley Towers to pinch old Bassett's cow creamer, and she thought I had come because I loved her so much that I couldn't stay away from her side. A frightful, tender, melting look that went right through me like a red-hot bradawl through a pat of butter and filled me with a nameless fear. I wished now I hadn't plugged Spinoza so heartily, and above all I wished I hadn't been caught in the act of apparently buying this blighted Spindrift. I saw that unwittingly I had been giving myself a terrific build-up, causing this girl to see Bertie Wooster with new eyes and to get hep to his hidden depths. It might quite well happen that she would review the position in the light of this fresh evidence and decide that she'd made a mistake in breaking off her engagement to so rare a spirit. And once she got thinking along those lines, who knew what the harvest might be? An imperious urge came upon me to be elsewhere before I could make a chump of myself further. "Well, I'm afraid I must be popping," I said. "Most important appointment. Frightfully jolly seeing you again." "We ought to see each other more," she replied, still with that melting look. "We ought to have some long talks." "Oh, rather. A developing mind is so fascinating. Why don't you ever come to the hall?" "Oh, well, one gets a bit chained to the metropolis, you know. I should like to show you the reviews of Spindrift. They are wonderful. Edwin is pasting them in an album for me. I'd love to see them sometime, later on perhaps. Goodbye. You're forgetting your book. Oh, thanks. Well, toodaloo, I said, and fought my way out. The appointment to which I had alluded was with the barman of the Bollinger. Seldom, if ever, had I felt in such sore need of a restorative. I headed for my destination like a hart streaking towards cooling streams when heated in the chase, and was speedily in conference with the dispenser of lifesavers. 10 minutes later, feeling considerably better, though still shaken, I was standing in the doorway, twirling my umbrella and wondering what to do next, when my eye was arrested by an odd spectacle. A certain rumminess had begun to manifest itself across the way. Chapter 3. The Bollinger Bar conducts its beneficent activities about halfway up Bond Street, and on the other side of the thoroughfare, immediately opposite, there stands a courteous and popular jeweller's, where I generally make my purchases when the question of investing in bijouterie arises. In fact, the day being so fine, I was rather thinking of looking in there now and buying a new cigarette case. It was outside this jeweller's that the odd spectacle was in progress. A bloke of furtive aspect was shimmering to and fro on the threshold of the emporium, his demeanour rather like that of the cat in the adage, which, according to Jeeves, and I suppose he knows, let I dare not wait upon I would. He seemed, that is to say, desirous of entering, but was experiencing some difficulty in making the grade. He would have a sudden dash at it, and then draw back, and stand shooting quick glances right and left, as if fearing the scrutiny of the public eye. Over in New York, during the days of Prohibition, I have seen fellows doing the same sort of thing outside speakeasies. He was a massive bloke, and there was something in his appearance that seemed familiar. Then, as I narrowed my gaze and scanned him more closely, memory did its stuff. That beefy frame, that pumpkin-shaped head, the face that looked like a slab of pink dough, it was none other than my old friend Stilton Cheesewright. And what he was doing, pirouetting outside jewellery bins, was more than I could understand. I started across the road with the idea of instituting a probe or quiz, and at the same moment he seemed to summon up a sudden burst of resolution. As I paused to disentangle myself from a passing bus, he picked up his feet, tossed his head in a mettlesome sort of way, and was through the door like a man dashing into a railway station buffet with only 2 minutes for a gin and tonic before his train goes. When I entered the establishment, he was leaning over the counter, his gaze riveted on some species of merchandise which was being shown him by the gentlemanly assistant. To prod him in the hindquarters with my umbrella was with me the work of an instant. "Ahoy there, Stilton!" I cried. He spun round with a sort of guilty bound, like an adagio dancer surprised while watering the cat's milk. "Oh, hello," he said. There was a pause. At a moment like this, with old boyhood friends meeting again after long separation, I mean to say, you might have expected a good deal of animated what-hoing and an immediate picking up of the threads. Of this, however, there was a marked absence. The old Lang Syne spirit was strong in me, but not, or I was mistaken, equally strong in G. Darcy Cheesewright. I have met so many people in my time who have wished that Bertram was elsewhere that I have come to recognize the signs, and it was these signs that this former playmate was now exhibiting. He drew me away from the counter, shielding it from my gaze with his person, like somebody trying to hide the body. "I wish you wouldn't go spiking people in the backside with your beastly umbrella," he said, and one sensed the querulous note. "Gave me a nasty shock." I apologized gracefully, explaining that if you have an umbrella and are fortunate enough to catch an old acquaintance bending, you naturally do not let the opportunity slip, and endeavoured to set him at his ease with genial chit-chat. From the embarrassment he was displaying, I might have been some high official in the police force, interrupting him in the middle of a smash-and-grab raid. His demeanour perplexed me. "Well, well, well, Stilton," I said. "Quite a while since we met." "Yes," he responded, his air that of a man who was a bit sorry it hadn't been longer. "How's the boy?" "Oh, all right. How are you?" "Fine, thanks. As a matter of fact, I'm feeling unusually fizzy." "That's good." "I thought you'd be pleased." "Oh, I am. Well, goodbye, Bertie," he said, shaking me by the hand. "Nice to have seen you." I looked at him amazed. Did he really imagine, I asked myself, that I was as easily got rid of as this? Why, Experts have tried to get rid of Bertie Wooster and have been forced to admit defeat. I'm not leaving you yet, I assured him.
Aren't you?
He said wistfully. No, still here. Jeeves tells me you dropped in on me this morning.
Yes.
Accompanied by Nobby.
Yes.
You live at Steeple Bumpleigh too, I hear.
Yes.
It's a small world.
Not so very.
Jeeves thinks it is.
Well, fairly small, perhaps, he agreed, making a concession. You're sure I'm not keeping you, Bertie?
No.
I thought you might have a date somewhere.
No, not a thing. There was another pause. He hummed a few bars of a popular melody, but not rollickingly. He also shuffled his feet quite a bit. Been there long?
Where?
Steeple Bumpleigh.
Oh, no, not very long.
Like it?
Very much.
What do you do there?
Do?
Come, you know what I mean by do. Boko Fittleworth, for instance, writes wholesome fiction for the masses there. My Uncle Percy relaxes there after the day's shipping magneting. What's your racket? A rather odd look came into his map, and he fixed me with a cold and challenging eye, as if daring me to start something. I remembered having seen the same defiant glitter behind the spectacles of a man I met in a country hotel once, just before he told me his name was Snodgrass. It was as if this old companion of mine were on the brink of some shameful confession. Then he seemed to think better of it.
Oh, I mess about.
Mess about?
Yes, just mess about. Doing this and that, you know.
There seemed nothing to be gained by pursuing this line of inquiry. It was obvious that he did not intend to loosen up. I passed on accordingly to the point which had been puzzling me so much. Well, flitting lightly over that, I said, why were you hovering?
Hovering?
Yes.
When?
Just now, outside the shop.
I wasn't hovering.
You were distinctly hovering. You reminded me of a girl Jeeves was speaking about the other day, who stood with reluctant feet where the brook and river meet. And when I follow you in, I find you buzzing into the ear of the assistant, plainly making some furtive purchase. What are you buying, Stilton? Fixed by my penetrating eye, he came clean. I suppose he saw that further concealment was useless.
A ring,
he said in a low, hoarse voice. What sort of a ring? I asked, pressing him.
An engagement ring, he muttered, twisting his fingers and in other ways showing that he was fully conscious of his position.
Are you engaged?
Yes.
Well. I laughed heartily, as is my custom on these occasions, but on his inquiring in a throaty growl, rather like the snarl of the Rocky Mountains timber wolf, what the devil I was cackling about, cheesed the mirth. I had always found Stilton intimidating when stirred. In a weak moment at Oxford, misled by my advisers, I once tried to do a bit of rowing, and Stilton was the bird who coached us from the towing path. I could still recall some of the things he had said about my stomach, which, rightly or wrongly, he considered that I was sticking out. It would seem that when you are a vulgar boatman, you aren't supposed to stick your stomach out. I always laugh when people tell me they're engaged, I explained more soberly. It did not seem to mollify him, if mollify is the word I want. He continued to glower.
You have no objection to my being engaged?
No.
Why shouldn't I be engaged?
Oh, quite.
What do you mean by oh, quite?
I didn't quite know what I had meant by oh, quite, unless possibly oh, quite. I explained this, trying to infuse into my manner a soothing what-is-it, for he appeared to be hotting up. I hope you will be very, very happy, I said. He thanked me, though not effusively. Nice girl, I expect.
Yes.
The response was not what you would call lyrical, but we Woosters can read between the lines. His eyes were rolling in their sockets, and his face had taken on the colour and expression of a devout tomato. I could see that he loved like 1,000 of bricks. A thought struck me. It isn't Nobby.
No, she's engaged to Boko Fittleworth.
What?
Yes.
I never knew that. He might have told me. Nobby and Boko have hitched up, have they?
Yes.
Well. The laughing love god has been properly up on his toes in and around Steeple Bumpleigh of late. What?
Yes.
Never an idle moment. Day and night shifts. Your betrothed, I take it, is a resident.
Yes. Her name's Cray. Florence Cray.
What? The word escaped my lips in a sort of yowl, and he started and gave me the raised eyebrow. I suppose it always perplexes the young Romeo to some extent, when fellows begin yowling on being informed of the loved one's identity.
What's the matter?
He asked, a rather strained note in his voice. Well, of course, that yowl of mine, as you may well imagine, had been one of ecstasy and relief. I mean, if Florence was all tied up with him, The peril I had been envisaging could be considered to have blown a fuse and ceased to impend. Spinoza or no Spinoza, I felt, this let Bertram out. But I couldn't very well tell him that. "Oh, nothing," I said.
You seem to know her.
"Oh, yes, we've met."
I've never heard her speak of you.
"No?"
No. Have you known her long?
"A certain time."
Do you know her well?
"Pretty well."
When you say pretty well, you mean...
"Oh, fairly well, tolerably well."
How did you come to know her?
I was conscious of a growing embarrassment. A little more of this, I felt, and he would elicit the fact that his betrothed had once been very near to Bertram, a dashed sight nearer, as we have seen, than Bertram had liked. And no recently engaged bimbo cares to discover that he was not the little woman's first choice. It sort of rubs the bloom off the thing. What he wants to feel is that she spent her time gazing out of the turret window in a yearning spirit till he came galloping up on the white horse. I temporized accordingly. I believe the word is temporized. I should have to check up with Jeeves. Her ghastly father married my frightful aunt.
Is Lady Worplesdon your aunt?
And how?
You didn't know her before that?
Well, yes, slightly.
I see.
He was still giving me that searching look, like a G-man hobnobbing with a suspect, and I am not ashamed to confess that I wiped a bead of perspire from the brow with the ferrule of my umbrella. That embarrassment to which I have referred was still up and doing, in fact more so than ever. I could see now what I had failed to spot before, that in thinking of him as a Romeo, I had made an incorrect diagnosis. The bird whose name ought to have sprung to my mind was Othello. In this cheese-right it was plain I had run up against one of those touchy lovers who go about the place in a suspicious and red-eyed spirit, eager to hammer the stuffing out of such of the citizenry as they suppose to be, or to have been in any sense matey with the adored object. It would, in short, require but a sketchy outline of the facts relating to self and Florence to unleash the caveman within him. When I say slightly, I hasten to add, I mean, of course, that we were just acquaintances.
Just acquaintances, eh?
Just.
You simply happened to meet her once or twice?
That's right. You put it in a nutshell.
I see. The reason I ask is that it seemed to me, when I told you she was engaged to me, that your manner was peculiar.
It always is before lunch.
You started,
Touch of cramp.
and uttered an exclamation, as if the news had come as an unpleasant shock to you.
Oh, no.
You're sure it didn't?
Not a bit.
In fact, you were mere acquaintances?
Mere to the core.
Still, it's strange that she's never mentioned you.
Well, pip-pip, I said, changing the subject, and withdrew. Chapter 4. It was a grave and thoughtful Bertie Wooster who started to amble back to the old flat. I was feeling a bit weak, too. During the recent scene I had run the gamut of the emotions, as I believe it's called, and that always takes it out of one. My first reaction to Stilton's revelation had, as I have indicated, been relief, and of course I was still rolling the eyes up to heaven in silent thankfulness a goodish bit. But it is seldom that the Woosters think only of self, and I now found the contemplation of the dreadful thing which had come upon this man filling me almost to the brim with pity and terror. It seemed to me that a Save Stilton Cheese-Right movement ought to be got under way immediately. For though he wasn't what you would call absolutely one of my bosom pals, like Boko Fittleworth, one has one's human feelings. I remembered how the iron had entered into my gizzard when I was faced with the prospect of being led to the altar by Florence Cray. One could see, of course, how the tragedy had occurred. It was the poor blister's pathetic desire to do his soul a bit of good that had landed him in this awful predicament. As is so often the case with these stolid, beefy birds, he had always had a yearning for higher things. This whole business of jacking up the soul is one that varies according to what Jeeves calls the psychology of the individual, some being all for it, others not. You take me, for instance. I don't say I've got much of a soul, but such as it is, I'm perfectly satisfied with the little chap. I don't want people fooling about with it. Leave it alone, I say. Don't touch it. I like it the way it is. But with Stilton, it was different. Buttonhole him and offer to give his soul a shot in the arm, and you found in him a receptive audience and a disciple ready to try anything once. Florence must have seemed to him just what the doctor ordered, and he had probably quite enjoyed thumbing the pages of Types of Ethical Theory, feeling no doubt that this was the stuff to give the troops. But, and this was the reflection that furrowed the brow, how long would this last? I mean to say, he might be liking the setup, but as I saw it, the time would come when he would examine his soul, note how it had sprouted, and say, "Fine, that's enough to be going on with, let's call it a day," only to discover that he was inextricably entangled with a girl who had merely started. It was from this fate, which is sometimes called the bitter awakening, that I wanted to rescue him. How to do it was of course a problem, and many chaps in my place would, I suppose, have been nonplussed. But my brain was working like a buzzsaw this morning, and the two snifters at the Bollinger had put a keen edge on it. By the time I was latch-keying my way into the flat, I had placed my finger on the solution. The thing to do, I saw, was to write a strong note to Nobby Hopwood, outlining the situation and urging her to draw Stilton aside and make it quite clear to him what he was up against. Nobby, I reasoned, had known Florence since she was so high, and would consequently be in a position to assemble all the talking points. Still, just in case she might have overlooked any of them, I carefully pointed out in my communication all Florence's defects, considered not only as a prospective bride, but as a human being. I put my whole heart into the thing, and it was with an agreeable feeling of duty done and a kindly act accomplished that I took it round the corner and dropped it in the pillar box. When I got back, I found Jeeves once more in residence. He had returned from his mission and was fooling about at some domestic task in the dining room. I gave him a hail, and he floated in. "Jeeves," I said, "you remember Mr. Cheesewright who called this morning?"
"Yes, sir."
"I ran into him just now buying an engagement ring. He is betrothed."
"Indeed, sir?"
"Yes, and you know who too? Lady F. Cray."
"Indeed, sir."
We exchanged a meaning glance, or rather two meaning glances, I giving him one and he giving me the other. There was no need for words. Jeeves is familiar with every detail of the Wooster-Cray imbroglio, having been constantly at my side right through that critical period in my affairs. As a matter of fact, as I have recorded elsewhere in the archives, it was he who got me out of the thing. And what's so poignant, Jeeves, if that's the word I want, is that he seems to like it."
"Indeed, sir?"
"Yes, rather pleased about it all than otherwise, it struck me. It reminded me of those lines in the poem, 'See how the little, how does it go, tum-tumty-tiddly-push.' Perhaps you remember the passage."
"Alas, regardless of their fate, the little victims play, sir."
"Quite. Sad, Jeeves."
"Yes, sir."
"He must be saved from himself, of course, and fortunately I have the situation well in hand. I have taken all the necessary steps, and anticipate a happy and successful issue. And now," I said, turning to the other matter on the agenda paper, "tell me about Uncle Percy. You saw him?"
"Yes, sir."
"Was he in the market for aid and counsel?"
"Yes, sir."
"I knew I was right. What was it? Blackmail? Does he want you to pinch damaging correspondence from the peroxided? Has some quick-thinking adventuress got him in her toils?"
"Oh, no, sir. I am sure his lordship's private life is above reproach."
I weighed this in the light of the known facts. I'm not so sure about that. It depends what you call above reproach. He once chased me over a measured mile, showing great accuracy with a hunting crop. At a moment, too, when being halfway through my first cigar, I was in urgent need of quiet and repose. To my mind, a man capable of that would be capable of anything. Well, if it wasn't blackmail, what was the trouble?
"His lordship finds himself in a somewhat difficult position, sir."
"What's biting him?" He did not reply for a space. A wooden expression had crept into his features, and his eyes had taken on the look of cautious reserve which you see in those of parrots when offered half a banana by a stranger of whose bona fides they are not convinced. It meant that he had come over all discreet, as he sometimes does, and I hastened to assure him that he might speak freely. You know me, Jeeves, the silent tomb.
"The matter is highly confidential, sir. It should not be allowed to go further."
"Wild horses shall not drag it from me. Not that I suppose they'll try."
"Well then, sir, his lordship informs me that he is in the process of concluding the final details of a business agreement of great delicacy and importance."
"And he wanted you to vet the thing for snags?"
"Not precisely that, sir, but he desired my advice."
"They all come to you, Jeeves, don't they? From the lowest to the highest."
"It is kind of you to say so, sir."
"Did he mention what the B.A. of great D and I was?"
"No, sir, but of course one has read the papers."
I haven't.
You do not study the financial pages, sir?
Never give them a glance.
They have been devoting considerable space of late to rumours of a merger or combination which is said to be impending between his lordship's Pink Funnel Line and an equally prominent shipping firm of the United States of America, sir. It is undoubtedly to this that his lordship was guardedly alluding.
The information did not make me leap about to any extent. Going to team up, are they, these nautical tycoons?
So it is supposed, sir.
Well, God bless them.
Yes, sir.
I mean, why shouldn't they?
Exactly, sir.
Well, what's his difficulty?
A somewhat tense situation has arisen, sir. The negotiations would appear to have arrived at a point where it is essential that his lordship shall meet and confer with the gentleman conducting the pourparlers on behalf of the American organization. On the other hand, it is vital that he shall not be seen in the latter's society, for such a meeting would instantly be accepted in the city as conclusive proof that the fusion of interests was about to take place, with immediate reactions on the respective shares of the two concerns.
I began to see daylight. There have been mornings after some rout or revel at the drones when this sort of thing would merely have caused the head to throb. But today, as I have said, I was feeling exceptionally bright. They would go up, you mean?
A sharp rise would be inevitable, sir.
And Uncle Percy views such a prospect with concern?
Yes, sir.
His idea being to collect a parcel cheap before the many-headed can horn in and spoil the market.
Precisely, sir. Rem acu tetigisti.
Rem?
Acu tetigisti, sir. A Latin expression. Literally it means you have touched the matter with a needle, but a more idiomatic rendering would be
put my finger on the nub.
Exactly, sir.
Yes, I get it now. You have clarified the situation. Getting right down to it, these two old buzzards have got to foregather in secret and require a hideout.
Precisely, sir. And of course the movements of both gentlemen are being closely watched by representatives of the financial press.
I suppose this mystic sort of stuff goes on all the time in the world of commerce.
Yes, sir.
One understands and sympathizes.
Yes, sir.
Though one dislikes the idea of Uncle Percy getting any richer, already he has the stuff in gobs. However, bearing in mind the fact that he is an uncle by marriage, I suppose one ought to espouse his cause. Had you anything to suggest?
Yes, sir.
I bet you had.
It occurred to me that such a meeting might well take place unobserved if the two parties were to arrange to come together beneath the roof of some remote country cottage.
I mused. You mean a cottage in the country somewhere?
You have interpreted me exactly, sir.
I don't think much of that, Jeeves. You must be losing your grip.
Sir?
Well, to name but one objection, how can you go to the owner of a country cottage whom you don't know from Adam and ask him to let you and your pals plot in the parlour?
It would be necessary, of course, that the proprietor of the establishment should be no stranger to his lordship.
He'd have to be somebody who knew Uncle Percy, you mean?
Precisely, sir.
But, Jeeves, my dear old soul, don't you see that makes it still worse? Use the bean. In that case, the chap says to himself, "Hullo, old Worpleston having secret meetings with mystery men? Come, come, what's all this? I'll bet this means the merger I've been reading about so much is going to come off." And he nips out and phones his broker to start buying those shares and to keep on buying till he's blue in the face, thus wrecking all Uncle Percy's carefully laid plans and rendering him sicker than mud. You follow me, Jeeves?
Completely, sir. I had not overlooked that contingency. The occupant of the cottage would, of course, have to be some gentleman whom his lordship could trust.
Such as?
Well, yourself, sir.
But, sorry to have to rub it in like this, but it's only kind to remove the scales from your eyes. I haven't got a cottage.
Yes, sir.
I don't get you, Jeeves.
His lordship is placing one of his own at your disposal, sir. He instructed me to say that he wishes you to proceed tomorrow to Steeple Bumpleigh.
Steeple Bumpleigh?
Where you will find a small but compact residence awaiting you in perfect condition for immediate occupation. It is delightfully situated, not far from the river.
It needed no more than that word river to tell me what had occurred. On his good mornings, I don't suppose there are more than a handful of men in the W1 postal district of London swifter to spot Umpus Bumpus than Bertie Wooster, and this was one of my particularly good mornings. I saw the whole hideous plot. Jeeves, I said, you have done the dirty on me.
I am sorry, sir. It seemed the only solution of his lordship's problem. I feel sure, sir, that when you see the residence in question, your prejudice against Steeple Bumpleigh will be overcome. I speak, of course, only from hearsay, but I understand from his lordship that it is replete with every modern convenience. It contains one large master's bedroom, a well-appointed sitting-room, water, both hot and cold.
The usual domestic offices, I said, and I meant it to sting.
Yes, sir. Furthermore, you will be quite adjacent to Mr. Fittleworth.
And you will be quite adjacent to your fish.
Why, yes, sir. The point had not occurred to me, but now that you mention it, that is certainly so. I should find a little fishing most enjoyable, if you could spare me from time to time while we are at Wee Nook.
Did you say Wee Nook?
Yes, sir.
Spelled, I'll warrant, with an E.
Yes, sir.
I breathed heavily through the nostrils. Well, listen to me, Jeeves. The thing's off. You understand? Off. Spelt with an O and 2 F's. I'm dashed if I'm going to be made what's the word?
Sir?
A cat's paw. Though why cat's paw? I mean, what have cats got to do with it?
The expression derives from the old story of the cat, the monkey, and the chestnut, sir. It appears...
Skip it, Jeeves. This is no time for chewing the fat about the animal kingdom. And if it's a story about where the monkey puts the nuts, I know it, and it's very vulgar. Getting back to the rays, I absolutely, positively, and totally refuse to go to Steeple Bumpleigh.
Well, of course, sir, it is perfectly open to you to adopt the attitude you indicate, but,
He paused, massaging the chin. I saw his point. Uncle Percy would look askance, you mean?
Yes, sir.
And might report the matter to Aunt Agatha.
Precisely, sir. And her ladyship, when incensed, can be noticeably unpleasant.
Rem accu tetigisti, I said moodily. All right, start packing. Chapter 5. It has been well said of Bertram Wooster, by those who enjoy his close acquaintance, that if there is one quality more than another that distinguishes him, it is his ability to keep the lip stiff and upper and make the best of things. Though crushed to earth, as the expression is, he rises again, not absolutely in mid-season form perhaps, but perkier than you would expect, and with an eye alert for silver linings. Waking next morning to another day, and thumbing the bell for the cup of tea, I found myself, though still viewing the future with concern, considerably less down among the wines and spirits than I had been yestereen. The flesh continued to creep briskly at the thought of entering the zone of influence of Uncle Percy and loved ones, but I was able to discern one reasonably brightish spot in the setup. You did say, Jeeves, I said, touching on this as he entered with the steaming bohea, that Aunt Agatha would not be at Steeple Bumpleigh to greet me on my arrival.
Yes, sir. Her ladyship expects to be absent for some little time.
If she's going to remain with young Foss till they've de-mumped him, it may well be that she will be away during the whole of my sojourn.
Quite conceivably, sir.
That is a substantial bit of goose.
Yes, sir, and I am happy to be able to indicate another. In the course of her visit yesterday, Miss Hopwood mentioned a fancy dress ball, which it appears is to take place at East Wibley, the market town adjacent to Steeple Bumpleigh. You will enjoy that, sir.
I shall indeed, I assented, for as a dancer I outfred the nimblest astaire, and fancy dress binges have always been my dish. When does it come to a head?
Tomorrow night, I understand, sir.
Well, I must say this has brightened the horizon considerably. When I have breakfasted, I'll go out and buy a costume. Sinbad the Sailor, don't you think?
That should prove most effective, sir.
Not forgetting the ginger whiskers that go with it.
Precisely, sir. They are of the essence.
If you've finished the packing, you can cram it into the small suitcase.
Very good, sir.
We'll drive down, of course.
Possibly it would be best, sir, if I were to make the journey by train.
A bit haughty, this exclusiveness, is it not, Jeeves?
I should have mentioned, sir, that Miss Hopwood rang up, hoping that you would be able to accommodate her in your car. Assuming that I should be falling in with your wishes in doing so, I took the responsibility of replying that you would be quite agreeable.
I see. Yes, that's all right.
Her ladyship has also telephoned.
Aunt Agatha?
Yes, sir.
No rot, I trust, about having changed her mind and decided not to rally round young Foss.
"Oh, no, sir. It was merely to leave a message saying that she wishes you to call in at Aspinall's in Bond Street before you leave, and secure a brooch which she purchased there yesterday."
"She does she? Why me?" I asked, speaking with a touch of acerbity, for I rather resented this seeming inability on the relative's part to distinguish between a nephew and a district messenger boy.
"I understand that the trinket is a present for Lady Florence, sir, who is celebrating her birthday today. Her ladyship wishes you to convey it to its destination personally, realizing that, should she entrust it to the ordinary channels, the gift will be delayed in its arrival beyond the essential date."
"You mean, if she posts it, it won't get there in time?"
"Precisely, sir."
"I see. Yes, there's something in that."
"Her ladyship appeared a little dubious as to your ability to carry through the commission without mishap."
"Oh."
"But I assured her that it was well within your scope."
"I should think so," I said, piqued. I balanced a thoughtful lump of sugar on the teaspoon. "So it's Lady Florence's birthday, is it?" I said, pondering. "This opens up a social problem on which I shall be glad to have your opinion. Ought I to weigh in with a present?"
"No, sir."
"Not necessary, you think?"
"No, sir. Not after what has occurred."
I was glad to hear him say so. I mean, while one wants on all occasions to do the thing, it is a tricky business, this bestowing of gifts, and apt to put ideas into a girl's head. Coming on top of Spindrift and Spinoza, the merest bottle of scent at this juncture might well have set such a seal upon my glamour as to cause the Beazle to decide to return Stilton to store and make other arrangements. Well, I defer to your judgment, Jeeves. No present for Lacrae, then?
"No, sir."
But while on this subject, we shall shortly have to be nosing round for one for La Hopwood.
"Sir?"
"A wedding gift. She's gone and got engaged to Boko Fittleworth."
"Indeed, sir. I am sure I wish the young lady and gentleman every happiness."
"Well spoken, Jeeves. Me, too. The projected union, I may say at once, is one that has my complete approval, which is not always the case when a pal puts the banns up."
"No, sir."
Too often on such occasions one feels, as I feel so strongly with regard to poor old Stilton, that the kindly thing to do would be to seize the prospective bridegroom's trousers in one's teeth and draw him back from danger, as faithful dogs do to their masters on the edge of precipices on dark nights.
"Yes, sir."
But in the present case I have no such misgivings. Each of the contracting parties, in my opinion, has picked a winner, and it is with a light heart that I shall purchase the necessary fish slice. I'm even prepared, if desired, to be best man and make a speech at the wedding breakfast, and one cannot say more than that.
"No, sir."
"Right-ho, Jeeves," I said, flinging back the bedclothes and rising from the couch. "Unchain the eggs and bacon. I will be with you in a moment." After I had broken the fast and smoked a soothing cigarette, I sallied forth, for I had a busy morning before me. I popped in at Aspinall's and pocketed the brooch, and thence repaired to the establishment of the Cohen brothers in Covent Garden, well known among the cognoscenti as the Mecca for the discriminating seeker after fancy dress costumes. They were fortunately able to supply me with the required Sinbad, the last they had in stock, and a visit to a nearby theatrical wiggery put me in possession of an admirable set of ginger whiskers, thus giving me a full hand. The car was at the door on my return, a suitcase of feminine aspect in its rumble. This seemed to indicate that Nobby had arrived, and as I expected, I found her in the sitting room, sipping a refresher. It having been some considerable time since we had foregathered, there ensued, of course, a certain period of leaping about and fraternizing. Then, having put away a refresher myself, I escorted her to the car and bunged her in. Jeeves, following my instructions, had placed the small suitcase with the Sinbad in it beneath the front seat, so that it should be under my personal eye, and we were thus all set. I trod on the self-starter, and we began the journey, Jeeves standing on the pavement, seeing us off like an archbishop blessing pilgrims, his air that of one who would shortly be following by train with a heavy luggage. Though sorry to be deprived of this right-hand man's society, for his conversation always tends to elevate and instruct, I was glad to get Nobby alone. I wanted to hear all about this pending merger with Boko. Each being a valued member of my entourage, the news that they were affianced had interested me strangely. I am never much of a lad for chatting in traffic, and until I had eased the vehicle out of the congested districts, I remained strong and silent, the lips tense, the eyes keen. But when we were bowling along the Portsmouth Road, with nothing to distract the attention, I got down to it. Chapter 6. So you and Boko are planning to leap in among the orange blossoms, I said. I had the news from Stilton yesterday and was much stirred. I hope you approve. Thoroughly. Nice work, in my opinion. I think you're both onto a good thing and would be well advised to push it along with the utmost energy. I have always considered you an extremely sound young potato. She thanked me for these kind words, and I assured her that the tribute was well deserved. As for Boko, I proceeded, one of the best, of course. I could tell you things about Boko which would drive it well into your nut that you have picked a winner. You don't have to. Her voice was soft and tender, like that of a hen crooning over its egg, and it was easy to see that as far as she was concerned, Cupid's dart had done its stuff. I gave the wheel a twiddle to avoid a casual dog, and went into my questionnaire. I always like to know all the facts on these occasions. When did you arrange this match? About a week ago. But you felt it coming on before that, I take it. Oh, yes. Directly we met. When was that? At the end of May. It was love at first sight, was it? It was. On his side also? On his side also. Well, I could readily understand Boko falling in love at first sight with Nobby, of course, for she is a girl liberally endowed with oomph. But how she could have fallen in love at first sight with Boko beat me. The first sight of Boko reveals to the beholder an object with a face like an intellectual parrot. Furthermore, as is the case with so many of the younger literati, he dresses like a tramp cyclist, affecting turtle-necked sweaters and grey flannel bags with a patch on the knee, and conveying a sort of general suggestion of having been left out in the rain overnight in an ash can. The only occasion on which I have ever seen Jeeves really rattled was when he met Boko for the first time. He winced visibly and tottered off to the kitchen, no doubt to pull himself together with cooking sherry. I mentioned this to Nobby, and she said she knew what I meant. You would think he was the sort of man who would have to grow on a girl gradually, as it were, wouldn't you? But no. There was one startled moment when I wondered if I was seeing things, and then bang, like a thunderbolt. As quick as that, was it? Yes. And his reactions were similar? Yes. Well, here's something I don't understand. You say you met in May, and we are now in July. Why did he take such a dickens of a time wooing you? He didn't exactly woo me. How do you mean, not exactly? A man either woos or he does not woo. There can be no middle course. There were reasons why he couldn't let himself go. You speak in riddles, young Nobby. Still, as long as he got round to it eventually. And when are the bells going to ring out at the little village church? I don't know if they ever are. Eh? Uncle Percy doesn't seem to think so. What do you mean? He disapproves of the match. What? I was astounded. It seemed to me for an instant that she must be pulling the Wooster leg. Then, scrutinizing her closely, I noted that the lips were tight and the brow clouded. This young Hopwood is a blue-eyed little half-portion with, normally, an animated dial. The dial to which I refer was now contorted with anguish as if she'd just swallowed a bad oyster. You don't mean that? I do. Egad, I said. For this was serious. Nobby, you see, was peculiarly situated. As often occurs, I believe, when girl A becomes the ward of bloke B, a clause had been inserted in the contract to the effect that there must be no rot about her marrying without the big chief's consent till she was 21, or 41, or something. So if Uncle Percy really had an anti-Boko complex, he was in a position to bung a spanner into the works with no uncertain hand. I couldn't get it. But why? The man must be cuckoo. Boko is one of our most eligible young bachelors. He makes pots of money with his pen. You see his stuff everywhere. That play he had on last year was a substantial hit, and they were saying at the Drones the other day that he's had an offer to go to Hollywood. Has he? Yes. Well then. Oh, I know all that, but what you're overlooking is the fact that Uncle Percy is the sort of man who's suspicious of writers. He doesn't believe in their solvency. He's been in business all his life, and he can't imagine anybody having any real money except a businessman. But he must know that Boko's dashed near being a celebrity. He's had his photograph in the Tatler. Yes, but Uncle Percy has the idea that an author's success is here today and gone tomorrow. Boko may be doing all right now, but he feels that his earning capacity may go fat at any moment. I suppose he pictures himself having to draw him out of the breadline a year or two from now and support him and me and half a dozen little Bokos for the rest of our lives. And then, of course, he was prejudiced against the poor darling from the start. Because of those trousers? They may have helped, perhaps. The man's an ass. Boko's a writer. He must know that writers are allowed a wide latitude. Besides, though I wouldn't care to have Jeeves hear me say so. Trousers aren't everything. But the real reason was that he thought Boko was a butterfly. I couldn't follow her. She had me fogged. Anything less like a butterfly than good old Boko I've never set eyes on. A butterfly? Yes, flitting from flower to flower and sipping. And he doesn't like butterflies. Not when they flit and sip. What on earth has put the extraordinary idea into his head that Boko's a flitting sipper? Well, you see, when he arrived in Steeple Bumpleigh, he was engaged to Florence. What? It was she who made him settle there. That was what I meant when I said that he couldn't woo me, as you call it, with any real abandon at first. Being engaged to Florence sort of hampered him. I was amazed. I nearly ran over a hen in my emotion. Engaged to Florence? He never told me. You haven't seen him for some time. No, that's true. Well, I'll be dashed. Did you know that I was once engaged to Florence? Of course. And now Stilton is. Yes. How absolutely extraordinary. It's like one of those great race movements you read about. I suppose it's her profile that does it. She has a lovely profile. Seen from the left. Seen from the right, too. Well, yes, in a measure, seen from the right, too. But would that account for it? I mean, in these busy days, you can't spend your whole time dodging round a girl trying to see her sideways. I still maintain that this tendency on the part of the populace to get engaged to Florence is inexplicable. And that made Uncle Percy a bit frosty to Boko. Glacial. I see. One understands his point of view, of course. He frowns on this in and out running. Florence yesterday, you today. I suppose he thinks you're just another of the flowers that Boko is flitting in on for sipping purposes. I suppose so. And in addition, he doubts his earning capacity. Yes. I pondered. If Uncle Percy really thought that Boko was a butterfly that might go broke at any moment, Love's young dream had unquestionably stubbed its toe. I mean, an oofy butterfly is bad enough, but it can at least pay the rent. I could well imagine a man of conservative views recoiling from one which might come asking for handouts for the rest of its life. A thought occurred to me. With that Wooster knack of looking on the bright side, I saw that all was not yet lost. How old do you have to be before you can marry without Uncle Percy's K.O.? 21. How old are you now? 20. Well, there you are, then. I knew that if we looked close enough, we should find that the sun was still shining. You only got to wait another year, and there you are. Yes, but Boko leaves for Hollywood next month. I don't know how you feel about this dream man of mine, but to me, and I have studied his character with loving care, he doesn't seem the sort of person to be allowed to go to Hollywood without a wife at his side to distract his attention from the local fauna. Her outlook shocked me, causing me to put a bit of austere topspin on my next crack. There can be no love where there is not perfect trust. Who told you that? Jeeves, I think. It sounds like one of his things. Well, Jeeves is wrong. There jolly well can be love without perfect trust, and don't you forget it. I love Boko distractedly, but at the thought of him going to Hollywood without me, I come over all faint. He wouldn't mean to let me down. I don't suppose he'd even know he was doing it. But one morning I should get an apologetic cable saying that he couldn't quite explain how it had happened, but that he'd inadvertently got married last night, and had I anything to suggest? It's his sweet, impulsive nature. He can't say no. I believe that's how he came to get engaged to Florence. I frowned meditatively. Now that she'd outlined the position of affairs, I could see that the situation was a tricky one. Then what's the procedure? I don't know. I frowned another meditative one. Something must be done. But what? I had an idea. It's often like that with the Woosters. They appear baffled, and then suddenly, bingo, an inspiration. Leave this to me, I said. What had crossed my mind was the thought that by establishing myself at Wee Nook on his behalf, I was doing Uncle Percy a dashed good turn. So dashed that if he had a spark of gratitude in his composition, he ought to be all over me. I could picture him clasping my hand and saying that thanks to me, that merger had come off, and was there any reward I cared to ask, for he could deny me nothing. What you need here, I said, is the suave intervention of a polished man of the world, a silver-tongued orator, who will draw Uncle Percy aside and plead your cause, softening his heart and making him take the big, broad view. I'll attend to it. You? In person? Within the next day or two? Oh, Bertie. It'll be a pleasure to put in a word for you. I anticipate notable results. I shall probably play on the old crumb as on a stringed instrument. She registered girlish joy. Bertie, you're a lamb."
Maybe you're right. A touch of the lamb, perhaps.
"It's a wonderful idea. You see, you've known Boko so long.
Virtually from the egg.
You'll be able to think all sorts of things to say about him. Did he ever save your life when you were a boy?"
Not that I remember.
"You could say he did."
I doubt if it would go well.
Uncle Percy was none too keen on me at that epoch. It would be more likely to strike a chord if I told him that Boko had repeatedly tried to assassinate me when I was a boy. However, leave it to me. I'll find words. All this while, of course, the old two-seater had been humming along towards Steeple Bumpleigh with the needle in the 60s, and at this point Nobby notified me that we were approaching our destination. "Those chimneys through the trees are the hall. You see that little lane to the left? You go down it and you come to Boko's place. Yours is about half a mile beyond it, up another sort of side turning. You really will plead with Uncle Percy?
Like Billy-O.
You won't weaken?"
Not a chance.
"Of course, it's just possible that you may not have to. You see, I thought that if Boko and Uncle Percy could really get together, Uncle Percy might learn to love him. So, though it wasn't easy, I arranged that Boko should give him lunch today. I hope everything's gone all right. A lot depends on how Boko behaved. I mean, up till now, whenever they've met, he's always been so stiff in his manner. I begged him with tears in my eyes to let himself go and be bright and genial, and he promised he would try, so I'm hoping for the best."
"Me too," I said, and, if I remember correctly, patted her little hand.
I then drove to the hall and decanted her at its gates, assuring her that even if Boko had failed to fascinate at the midday meal, I would see to it that everything came out all right. With a final cheery wave of the hand, I backed the car and headed for the lane of which she had spoken. All this talking had, of course, left me with a well-defined thirst, and it seemed to me, despite a householder's natural desire to take possession as soon as possible, that my first move had better be to stop off at Boko's and touch him for the needful. I assumed that the whitewashed cottage standing on the riverbank must be the Bokery's, for Nobby had indicated that I had to pass it on my way to Wee Nook. I hove to alongside accordingly, and noting that one of the windows at the side was open, I approached it and whistled. A hoarse shout from within, and a small china ornament whizzing past my head, informed me that my old friend was at home. Chapter 7. The passing of the china ornament, which had come within an ace of copping me on the napper, drew from my lips a sharp "Oi!" and as if in answer to the cry, Boko now appeared at the window. His hair was disordered, and his face flushed, presumably with literary composition. In appearance, as I have indicated, this man of letters is a cross between a comedy juggler and a parrot that has been dragged through a hedge backwards, and you never catch him at his nattiest in the workshop. I took it that I had interrupted him at a difficult point in a chapter. He had been glaring at me through horn-rimmed spectacles, but now, as he perceived who it was that stood without, the flame faded behind the lenses, to be replaced by a look of astonishment. "Good Lord, Bertie, is that you?" I assured him that such was the case, and he apologized for having bunged china ornaments at me. "Why did you imitate the note of the lesser screech owl?" he said rebukingly. "I thought you were young Edwin. He comes sneaking round here trying to do me acts of kindness, and that's always how he announces his presence. I am never without a certain amount of ammunition handy on the desk. Where on earth did you spring from?" "The metropolis. I've just arrived." "Well, you might have had the sense to send a wire. I'd have killed the fatted calf." I saw that he was under a misapprehension. "I haven't come to stay with you. I'm hanging out at a cottage which they tell me is a little farther down the road." "Wee Nook?" "That's right. Have you taken Wee Nook?" "Yes. What made you suddenly decide to do that?" I had foreseen that some explanation of my presence might be required, and was ready with my story. My lips being sealed, of course, on the real reason which had brought me to Steeple Bumpleigh, it was necessary to dissemble. "Jeeves thought he'd like to do a bit of fishing, and," I added, making the thing more plausible, "they tell me a fancy-dress dance is breaking out in these parts tomorrow night. Well, you know me when I hear rumours of these entertainments. The war horse and the bugle. And now," I said, licking the lips, "how about a cooling drink? The journey's left me a little parched." I climbed through the window and sank into a chair, while he went off to fetch the ingredients. Presently he returned with a jingling tray, and after we'd done a bit of stag-at-evening, and exchanged some desultory remarks about this and that, I did the civil thing by congratulating him on his engagement. I was saying to Nobby, whom I drove down here in my car, how extraordinary it was that any girl should have fallen in love with you at first sight. I wouldn't have thought it could be done. It came as quite a surprise to me, too. You could have knocked me down with a feather. I don't wonder. Still, all sorts of unlikely people do seem to excite the spark of passion. Look at my Aunt Agatha. Ah, and Stilton. You know about Stilton? I ran into him in a jeweller's buying the ring, and he told me of his fearful predicament. Sooner him than me. Just how I feel. Nobby thinks it's Florence's profile that does it. Quite possibly. There was a silence, broken only by the musical sound of us having another go at the elixir. Then he heaved a sigh and said that life was rummy, to which I assented, that in many respects it was very rummy. "Take my case," he said. "Did Nobby tell you what the position was?" "About Uncle Percy gumming the works, you mean?" "Oh, rather." "A nice bit of box fruit, what?" "So it struck me, decidedly. The heart bled." "Fancy having to get anyone's consent to your getting married in this enlightened age. Things an anachronism. Why, you can't use it as a motive for a story even in a woman's magazine nowadays. Doesn't your Aunt Dahlia run some sort of women's rag? Milady's Boudoir, 6pence weekly. I once contributed an article to it on what the well-dressed man is wearing. Well, I've never read Milady's Boudoir, but I've no doubt it is the lowest dregs of the publishing world. Yet if I were to submit a story to your aunt about a girl who couldn't marry a fellow without some blasted head of the family's consent, she would hoot at it. That is to say, I'm not allowed to turn an honest penny by using this complication in my work, but is jolly well allowed to come barging in and ruining my life. A pretty state of things. What happens if you go ahead regardless? I believe I get jugged. Or is that only when you marry a ward in Chancery without the Lord Chancellor hoisting the all-right flag? You have me there. We could ask Jeeves. Yes, Jeeves would know. Have you brought him? He's following with the heavy luggage. How is he these days? Fine. Brain all right? Colossal. Then he may be able to think of some way out of this mess. We shan't need Jeeves. I'm handling the whole thing. I'm going to get hold of Uncle Percy and plead your cause. You? Oddly enough, that's what Nobby said, in the same surprised tone. But I thought the man scared you stiff. He does. But I've been able to do him a good turn, and my drag with him is now substantial. Well, that's fine, he said, brightening. Snap into it, Bertie. But, he added, coming unbrightened again, you've got a tough job. Oh, I don't know. I do. After what happened at lunch today, I was conscious of a sudden, quick concern. Your lunch with Uncle Percy? That's the one. Didn't it go well? Not too well. Nobby was anticipating that it would bring home the bacon. Ha! God bless her optimistic little soul. I gave him one of my keen looks. There was a sombre expression on his map. The nose was wiggling in an overwrought way. It was easy to perceive that pain and anguish racked the brow. "Tell me all," I said. He unshipped a heavy sigh. "You know, Bertie, the whole idea was a mistake from the start. She should never have brought us together. And if she had to bring us together, she ought not to have told me to be bright and genial. You know about her wanting me to be bright and genial?" "Yes. She said you were inclined to be a bit stiff in your manner with Uncle Percy." "I am always stiff in my manner with elderly gentlemen who snort like foghorns when I appear, and glare at me as if I was somebody from Moscow distributing red propaganda. It's the sensitive, highly strung artist in me. Old hardened arteries does not like me." "So Nobby said. She thinks it's because he regards you as a butterfly. My personal view is that it's those grey flannel bags of yours. What's wrong with them? The patch on the knee, principally. It creates a bad impression. Haven't you another pair? Who do you think I am? Beau Brummel?" I forbore to pursue the subject. "Well, go on. Where was I?" "You were saying you made a bloomer in trying to be bright and genial." "Ah, yes, that's right. I did. And this is how it came about. You see, the first thing a man has to ask himself when he's told to be bright and genial is, how bright, how genial? Shall he, that is to say, be just a medium ray of sunshine, or shall he go all out and shoot the works? I thought it over and decided to bar nothing and be absolutely rollicking. And that, I see now, is where I went wrong." He paused and remained for a space in thought. I could see that some painful memory was engaging his attention. "I wonder, Bertie," he said, coming to the surface at length, "if you were present one day at the Drones when Freddie Widgeon sprung those joke goods on the lunchers there." "Joke goods?" "The things you see advertised in toy shop catalogues as handy for breaking the ice,
and setting the table in a roar. You know, the plate lifter, the dribble glass, the surprise salt shaker.
Oh, those! I laughed heartily. I remembered the occasion well. Catsmeat Potter Purbright was suffering from a hangover at the moment, and I shall not readily forget his emotion when he picked up his roll and it squeaked and a rubber mouse ran out of it. Strong men had to rally round with brandy. And then I stopped laughing heartily. The frightful significance of his words hit me, and I started as if somebody had jabbed a red-hot skewer through the epidermis. You aren't telling me that you worked those off on Uncle Percy?
Yes, Bertie, that is what I did.
Golly!
That about covers it.
I groaned a hollow one. The heart had sunk. One has, of course, to make allowances for writers, all of them being more or less loony. Look at Shakespeare, for instance. Very unbalanced. Used to go about stealing ducks. Nevertheless, I couldn't help feeling that in springing joke goods on the guardian of the girl he loved, Boko had carried an author's natural goofiness too far. Even Shakespeare might have hesitated to go to such lengths. But why?
I suppose the idea at the back of my mind was that I ought to show him my human side.
Did he take it big?
Pretty big.
He didn't like it?
No, I can answer that question without reservation. He did not like it.
Has he forbidden you the house?
You don't have to forbid people houses after looking at them as he looked at me over the surprise salt shaker. The language of the eyes is enough. Do you know the surprise salt shaker? You joggle it, and out comes a spider. The impression I received was that he was allergic to spiders.
I rose. I had heard enough. I'll be pushing along, I said rather faintly.
What's the hurry? I ought to be going to Wee Nook. Jeeves will be arriving at any moment with the luggage, and I shall have to get settled in. I see. I would come with you, only I'm in the act of composing a well-expressed letter of apology to my Lord Worplesdon. I'd better finish it, though it may not be needed if all you say about being in a position to plead with him is true. Plead well, Bertie. Pitch it strong. Let the golden phrases come rolling out like honey. For as I say, I don't think you've got an easy job on your hands. Eloquence beyond the ordinary will be required. And by the way, not a word to Nobby about that lunch. The facts will have to be broken to her gently and by degrees, if at all.
My mood, as I set a course for Wee Nook, was, as you may well suppose, a good deal less effervescent than it had been. The idea of pleading with Uncle Percy had lost practically all its fascination. There rose before me a vision of this relative by marriage, as he would probably appear directly I mentioned Boko's name. The eyes glaring, the moustache bristling, and the tout ensemble presenting a strong resemblance to a short-tempered tiger of the jungle which has just seen its peasants shin up a tree. And while it would be going too far, perhaps, to say that Bertram Wooster shuddered, a certain coolness of the feet unquestionably existed. I was trying to hold the thought that, once that merger had gone through, joy would most likely reign so supreme that the old bounder would look even on Boko with the eye of kindliness, when there came the ting of a bicycle bell, and a voice called my name, woostering with such vehemence that I immediately braked the car and glanced round. The sight I saw smote me like a blow. Heaving alongside was Stilton Cheesewright, and on his face, as he alighted from his bicycle and confronted me, there was about as unpleasant a look as ever caught me in the eyeball. It was a look pregnant with amazement and hostility. A gore-blimey, what's this blighter doing here look. The sort of look, in fine, which the heroine of a pantomime gives the Demon King when he comes popping out of a trap at her elbow. And I could follow what was passing in his mind as clearly as if it had been broadcast on a nationwide hookup. All along, I had been far from comfortable when speculating as to what this Othello's reactions would be on discovering me in the neighbourhood. The way in which he had received the information that I was an old acquaintance of Florence's had shown that his thoughts had been given a morbid turn, causing him to view Bertram with suspicion, and I had been afraid that he was going to place an unfortunate construction on my sudden arrival in her vicinity. It was almost inevitable, I mean, that the thing should smack, in his view, far too strongly of young Lochinvar coming out of the west. And, of course, my lips being sealed, I couldn't explain. A delicate and embarrassing situation. And yet, amazing though you will find the statement, what was causing me to goggle at him with saucer eyes was not this look that told me that my fears had been well-founded, but the fact that the face attached to it was topped by a policeman's helmet. The burly frame, moreover, was clad in a policeman's uniform, and on the feet one noted the regulation official boots, or beetle crushers, which go to complete the panoply of the awful majesty of the law. In a word, Stilton Cheesewright had suddenly turned into a country copper, and I could make nothing of it. Chapter 8. I stared at the man. "Stab my vitals, Stilton," I cried in uncontrollable astonishment. "Why the fancy dress?" He, too, had a question to ask.
"What the hell are you doing here, you blood-stained Wooster?"
I held up a hand. This was no time for side issues. "Why, you got up like a policeman."
"I am a policeman."
"A policeman?"
"Yes."
"When you say policeman," I queried, groping, "do you mean policeman?"
"Yes."
"You're a policeman?"
"Yes, blast you. Are you deaf? I'm a policeman."
I grasped it now. He was a policeman. And my mind flashing back to yesterday's encounter in the jewellery bin, I realized what had made his manner furtive and evasive when I'd asked him what he did at Steeple Bumpleigh. He had shrunk from revealing the truth, fearing lest I might be funny at his expense, as indeed I would have been, extraordinarily funny. Even now, though the gravity of the situation forbade their utterance, I was thinking of at least 3 priceless cracks I could make.
"What about it? Why shouldn't I be a policeman?"
"Oh, rather."
"Half the men you know go into the police nowadays."
I nodded. This was undoubtedly true. Since they started that college at Hendon, the force has become congested with one's old buddies. I remember balmy Fotheringay Phipps describing to me with gestures his emotions on being pinched in Leicester Square one boat race night by his younger brother George. And much the same thing happened to Freddie Widgeon at Hurst Park in connection with his cousin Cyril. "Yes," I said, spotting a flaw, "but in London."
"Not necessarily."
"With the idea of getting into Scotland Yard and rising to great heights in their profession."
"That's what I'm going to do."
"Get into Scotland Yard?
"Yes."
Rise to great heights?"
"Yes."
"Well, I shall watch your future progress with considerable interest," I said. But I spoke dubiously. At Eton, Stilton had been captain of the boats, and he had also rowed assiduously for Oxford. His entire formative years, therefore, as you might say, had been spent in dipping an oar into the water, giving it a shove, and hauling it out again. Only a pretty dumb brick would fritter away his golden youth doing that sort of thing, which, in addition to being silly, is also the deuce of a sweat. And Stilton Cheesewright was a pretty dumb brick. A fine figure of a young fellow as far northwards as the neck, but above that, solid concrete. I could not see him as a member of the Big Four. Far more likely that he would end up as one of those Scotland Yard bunglers who used, if you remember, always to be getting into Sherlock Holmes's hair. However, I didn't say so. As a matter of fact, I didn't say anything, for I was too busy pondering on this new and unforeseen development. I was profoundly thankful that Jeeves had voted against my giving Florence a birthday present. Such a gift, if Stilton heard of it, would have led to his tearing me limb from limb, or at the best, summoning me for failing to abate a smoky chimney. You can't be too careful how you stir up policemen. I had succeeded in sidetracking his question for a space, but I knew that the respite would be merely temporary. They train these cops to stick to the point. I was not surprised, therefore, when he now repeated it. I am not saying I didn't wish he hadn't. All I'm saying is that I wasn't surprised.
"Well, to blaze it with all that, you haven't told me what you're doing in Steeple Bumpleigh."
I temporized. "Oh, just making a passing sojourn," I said nonchalantly, the old careless Bertram Wooster.
"You mean you've come to stay?"
"For a while. Somewhere over yonder is my little nest. I hope you will frequently drop in when off duty."
"And what made you suddenly decide to come taking little nests in these parts?"
"I went into my routine. Jeeves wanted to do a bit of fishing."
"Oh?"
"Yes, he tells me it's admirable here. You find the hook, and the fish do the rest." For quite a while he had been staring at me in an unpleasant, boiled sort of way, the brows drawn, the eyes bulging in their sockets. The austerity of his gaze now became intensified. Except for the fact that he hadn't taken out a notebook and a stub of pencil, he might have been questioning some rat of the underworld as to where he'd been on the night of June the 25th.
"I see. That is your statement, is it? Jeeves wanted to do a bit of fishing."
"That's right."
"Oh. Well, I'll tell you what you wanted to do, young blasted Wooster. A bit of snake in the grassing.
I affected not to have grabbed the gist, though in reality I'd got it nicely. Snake in the whatting?
Grassing.
I don't follow you.
Then I'll make it clearer. You've come here to sneak round Florence.
My dear chap! He ground a tooth or two. It was plain that he was in dangerous mood.
I may as well tell you, he resumed, that I was not at all satisfied with your evidence, with what you said when I saw you yesterday. You stated that you had known Florence...
Just one moment, Stilton. Sorry to interrupt, but do we bandy a woman's name?
Yes, we do, and bloody well keep on bandying it.
Oh, righto, I just wanted to know.
You stated that you had known Florence only slightly. Pretty well was the exact expression you used, and it seemed to me that your manner was suspicious. So when I got back, I saw her and questioned her about you. She confessed that you and she had once been engaged.
I moistened the lips with the tip of the tongue. I am never at my best tete-a-tete with the constabulary. They always seem somehow to quell my manly spirit. It may be the helmet that does it, or possibly the boots. And of course, when one of the gendarmerie is accusing you of trying to pinch his girl, the embarrassment deepens. At the moment of going to press, with Stilton's eyes boring holes through me, I had begun to feel like Eugene Aram just before they put the gyves on his wrists. I don't know if you remember the passage. Titum, 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 titumty, missed. I think it's missed. And Eugene Aram walked between with gyves upon his wrist. I cleared the throat and endeavoured to speak with a winning frankness. Why, yes, that's right. It all comes back to me. We were. Long ago.
Not so long ago.
Well, it seems like long ago.
Oh?
Yes.
Is that so?
Positively.
Whole thing's over, eh?
Definitely.
Nothing between you now? Not a thing. Then how do you account for the fact that she gives you a copy of her novel and writes to Bertie with love from Florence in it?
I tottered, and at the same time I'm bound to confess I found myself feeling a new respect for Stilton. At first, if you recollect, when he had spoken of rising to great heights at Scotland Yard, I had thought lightly of his chances. It seemed to me now that he must have the makings of a very hot detective indeed.
You had the book with you when you came into that jeweller's shop. You left it on the counter, and I looked inside.
I revised my views about his sleuthing powers. Not so hot after all. Sherlock Holmes, if you remember, always said that it was a mistake for a detective to explain his methods.
Well?
I laughed lightly. At least I tried to. As a matter of fact, the thing came out more like a death rattle. Oh, that was rather amusing.
All right. Go on. Make me laugh.
I was in the bookshop, and she came in.
You had an assignation with her in the bookshop?
No, just an accidental meeting.
I see. And you come down here to arrange another?
Good Lord, no.
Do you seriously expect me to believe that you aren't trying to steal her from me?
Nothing could be farther from my thoughts, old man.
Don't call me old man.
Righto, if you don't like it. The whole thing, officer, is one of those absurd misunderstandings. As I was starting to tell you, I was in this bookshop. Here he interrupted me, damning the bookshop with a good deal of heartiness.
I'm not interested in the bookshop. The point is that you have come down here to make a snake in the grass of yourself, and I'm not going to have it. I've just one thing to say to you, Wooster. Get out. But push off. Remove your beastly presence. Pop back to your London residence and stay there. And do it quick.
But I can't.
What do you mean?
Well, as I said before, my lips were sealed, but the Woosters are swift thinkers. Oh, Boko, I explained. I'm acting for him in a rather delicate matter. As you possibly may know, my Uncle Percy is endeavouring to put the B on his union with Nobby, and I have promised the young couple that I will plead for them. This will, of course, involve my remaining in statu... what is it? Pa! No, not pa, quo. That's the word I'm trying to think of. You can't plead with an uncle by marriage unless you're in statu quo. It seemed to me a pretty good and reasonable explanation, and I was distressed accordingly to observe that he was sneering unpleasantly.
I don't believe a word of it.
You plead? What's the good of you pleading?
As if anything you could say would have any weight with anybody. I repeat, clear out. Otherwise...
He didn't mention what would happen otherwise, but the menacing way in which he hopped on his bicycle and pedalled off spoke louder than words. I don't think I've ever seen anyone pedal with a more sinister touch to the ankle work. I was still looking after him, feeling a little weak, when from the opposite, or wee nook direction, there came the ting of another bicycle bell, and swivelling round, I perceived Florence approaching. As perfect an instance of one damn thing after another as I've ever experienced. In sharp contradistinction to those of Stilton, her eyes were shining with a welcoming light. She hopped off as she reached the car, and flashed a bright smile at me. "Ah, here you are, Bertie. I've just been putting a few flowers in wee nook for you." I thanked her, but with a sinking heart. I hadn't liked that smile, and I didn't like the idea of her sweating about strewing flowers in my path. The note struck seemed to me altogether too matey. Then I reminded myself that if she was betrothed to Stilton, there could be no real cause for alarm. After all, her father had married my aunt, which made us sort of cousins, and there was nothing necessarily sinister in a bit of cousinly bustling about. Blood, I mean to say, when you come right down to it, being thicker than water. "Frightfully decent of you," I said. I've just been having a chat with Stilton." "Stilton? Your affianced?" "Oh, Darcy. Why do you call him Stilton?" "A boyish nickname. We were at school together." "Oh. Then perhaps you can tell me if he was always such a perfect imbecile as he is today." I didn't like this. It didn't seem the language of love. "In what sense do you use the word imbecile?" "I use it as the only possible description of a man who, with a wealthy uncle willing and anxious to do everything for him, deliberately elects to become a common constable." "Why did he?" I asked. "Become a common constable, I mean." "He says that every man ought to stand on his own feet and earn a living." "Conscientious. Rubbish. You don't think it does him credit?" "No, I don't. I think he's a perfect idiot." There was a pause. It was plain that his behaviour rankled, and it seemed to me what was required here was a strong boost for the young copper. For I need scarcely say that, now that I was face to face again with this girl, all thought of carrying on with the promotion of that Save Stilton Cheesewright campaign was farther from my mind than ever. I should have thought you had been rather bucked about it all, as giving evidence of soul, I mean. Soul? It shows that he's got a great soul. I should be extremely surprised to find that he has any soul above those great clod-hopping boots he wears. He is just pig-headed. I have reasoned with him over and over again. His uncle wants him to stand for Parliament, and is prepared to pay all his expenses and to finance him generously for the rest of his life. But no, he just looks mulish and talks about earning his living. I am sick and tired of the whole thing, and I really don't know what I shall do about it. Well, goodbye, Bertie. I must be getting along," she concluded abruptly, as if she found the subject too painful to dwell on, and was off, just at the very moment when I had remembered that it was her birthday, and that I had a brooch in my pocket to deliver to her from Aunt Agatha. I could have called her back, I suppose, but somehow I didn't feel in the mood. Her words had left me shaking in every limb. The revelation of the flimsiness of the foundations on which the Florence Stilton romance appeared to be founded had appalled me, and I had to remain in statu quo and smoke a couple of cigarettes before I felt strong enough to resume my journey. Then, feeling a little better, and trying to tell myself that this was just a passing tiff, and that matters would speedily adjust themselves, I pushed on, and in another couple of minutes was coming to anchor abaft Wee Nook. Chapter 9. Wee Nook proved to be a decentish little shack situated in agreeable surroundings. A bit ye-olde, but otherwise all right. It had a thatched roof, and a lot of those windows with small leaded panes, and there was a rockery in the front garden. It looked, in short, as I subsequently learned was the case, as if it had formerly been inhabited by an elderly female of good family who kept cats. I had walked in and deposited the small suitcase in the hall, when, as I stood gazing about me and inhaling the fug which always seems to linger about these antique interiors, I became aware that there was more in this joint than met the eye. In a word, I suddenly found myself speculating on the possibility of it not only being fuggy, but haunted. What started this train of thought was the fact that odd noises were in progress somewhere near at hand. Here a bang, and there a crash, suggesting the presence of a poltergeist or what-not. The sounds seemed to proceed from the other side of a door at the end of the hall, and I was hastening thither to investigate, for I was dashed if I was going to have poltergeists lounging about the place as if it belonged to them, when I took a toss over a pail which had been placed in the fairway. and I just picked myself up, rubbing the spot, when the door opened and there entered a small boy with a face like a ferret. He was wearing the uniform of a Boy Scout, and I had no difficulty, in spite of the fact that his features were liberally encrusted with dirt, in identifying him as Florence's little brother Edwin, the child at whom Boko Fittleworth was accustomed to throw china ornaments. "Oh, hello, Bertie," he said, grinning all over his loathsome face. "Hello, you frightful young squirt," I responded civilly. "What are you doing here?" "Tidying up." I touched on a point of absorbing interest. "Was it you who left that ballet pail there?" "Where?" "In the middle of the hall." "Cool. Yes, I remember now. I put it there to be out of the way." "I see. Well, you'll be amused to learn that I've nearly broken my leg." He started. A fanatic gleam came into his eyes. He looked like a boy confronted with an unexpected saucer of ice cream. "I say, have you really? This is a bit of bunce. I can give you first aid." "No, you jolly well can't." "But if you bust your leg..." "I haven't bust my leg." "You said you had." "A mere figure of speech." "Well, you may have sprained your ankle." "I haven't sprained my ankle." "I can do first aid for contusions." "I haven't any contusions." "Stand back," I cried, for I was prepared to defend myself with iron resolution. There was a pause. His manner was that of one who finds the situation at a deadlock. My spirited attitude had plainly disconcerted him. "Can't I bandage you?" "You'll get a thick ear if you try." "You may get gangrene." "I anticipate no such contingency." "You'll look silly if you get gangrene." "No, I shan't. I shall look fine." "I knew a chap who bumped his leg and it turned black and had to be cut off at the knee." "You do seem to mix with the most extraordinary people." "I could turn the cold tap on it." "No, you couldn't." Again that baffled air came into his demeanour. I had nonplussed him. "Then I'll be getting back to the kitchen," he said. "I'm going to do the chimney. It needs a jolly good cleaning out. This place would have been a fearful mess if it hadn't been for me," he added with a smugness which jarred upon my sensibilities. "How do you mean if it hadn't been for you?" I riposted in my keen way. "I'll bet you've been spreading ruin and desolation on all sides." "I've been tidying up," he said with a touch of pique. "Florence put some flowers for you in the sitting room." "I know. She told me." "I fetched the water. Well, I'll go and do that chimney, shall I?" "Do it if it pleases you till your eyes bubble," I said, and dismissed him with a cold gesture. Now, I don't know how you would have made a cold gesture. No doubt people's methods vary, but the way I did it was by raising the right arm in a sort of salute and allowing it to fall to my side. And as it fell, I became aware of something missing. The coat pocket against which the wrist impinged should have contained a small, solid object, to wit, the package containing the brooch which Aunt Agatha had told me to convey to Florence for her birthday. And it didn't. The pocket was empty. And at the same moment the kid Edwin said, "Coo!" and stopped, and came up holding the thing. "Did you drop this?" he asked. Any doubts that may have lingered in the child's mind as to my having broken my leg must have been dispelled by the spring I made. I flew through the air with the greatest of ease. A panther could not have moved more nippily. I wrenched the thing from his grasp and once more pocketed it. He seemed intrigued. "What was it?" "A brooch. Birthday present for Florence." "Shall I take it to her?" "No, thanks." "I will if you like." "No, thanks." "It'll save you trouble." Had the circumstances been other than they were, I might have found this benevolence of his cloying, so much so, indeed, as to cause me to kick him in the pants. But he had rendered me so signal a service that I merely smiled warmly at the young blister, a thing I hadn't done for years. "No, thanks," I said. "I don't let it out of my hands. I will run across and deliver it this evening." "Well, well, young Edwin," I continued affably, "a smart piece of work, that. They train you sprouts to keep your eyes open. Tell me, how have you been all this while? All right? No colds, colics, or other juvenile ailments? Splendid. I should hate to feel that you'd been suffering in any way. It was decent of you to suggest putting my leg under the tap. Greatly appreciated. I wish I had a drink to offer you. You must come up and see me sometime when I'm more settled." And on this cordial note our interview terminated. I tottered out into the garden, and for a space stood leaning on the front gate, for my spine was still feeling a bit jellified, and I needed support. I say my spine had become as jelly, and if you knew my Aunt Agatha, you would agree that so it jolly well might. This relative is a woman who, like Napoleon, if it was Napoleon, listens to no excuses for failure, however sound. If she gives you a brooch to take to a stepdaughter and you lose it, It is no sort of use trying to tell her that the whole thing was an act of God, caused by your tripping over unforeseen pails and having the object jerked out of your pocket. Pawn though you may have been in the hands of fate, you get put through it just the same. If I had not recovered this blighted trinket, I should never have heard the last of it. The thing would have marked an epoch. World-shaking events would have been referred to as having happened about the time Bertie lost that brooch, or just after Bertie made such an idiot of himself over Florence's birthday present. Aunt Agatha is like an elephant, not so much to look at, for in appearance she resembles more a well-bred vulture, but because she never forgets. Leaning on the gate, I found myself seething with kindly feelings towards young Edwin. I wondered how I could ever have gone so astray in my judgment as to consider him a ferret-faced little son of a whatnot, and I was just going to debate in my mind the idea of buying him some sort of gift as a reward for his admirable behaviour, when there was a loud explosion, and turning I saw that wee Nook had gone up in flames. It gave me quite a start. Chapter 10. Well, everybody enjoys a good fire, of course, and for a while it was in a purely detached and appreciative spirit that I stood eyeing the holocaust. I felt that this was going to be value for money. Already the thatched roof was well ablaze, and it seemed probable that before long the whole edifice, being the museum piece it was, all dry rot and what-not, would spit on its hands and really get down to it. And so, as I say, for about the space of 2 shakes of a duck's tail, I stood watching it with quiet relish. Then, putting a bit of a damper on the festivities, there came floating into my mind a rather disturbing thought, to wit, that the last I had seen of young Edwin, he had been seeping back into the kitchen. Presumably, therefore, he was still on the premises, and the conclusion to which one was forced was that unless somebody took prompt steps through the proper channels, he was likely, ere long, to be rendered unfit for human consumption. This was followed by a second, and still more disturbing thought, that the only person in a position to do the necessary spot of "Fireman, save my childing" was good old Wooster. I mused. I suppose you would call me a fairly intrepid man, taken by and large, but I'm bound to admit I wasn't any too keen on the thing. Apart from anything else, my whole attitude towards the stripling who was faced with the prospect of being grilled on both sides had undergone another quick change. When last heard from, if you remember, I had been thinking kindly thoughts of young Edwin, and even going to the length of considering buying him some inexpensive present. But now I found myself once more viewing him with the eye of censure. I mean to say, it was perfectly obvious to the meanest intelligence that it was owing to some phonus balonus on his part that the conflagration had been unleashed, and I was conscious of a strong disposition to leave well alone. It being, however, one of those situations where noblesse more or less obliges, I decided that I had better do the square thing, and I had torn off my coat and flung it from me, and was preparing to plunge into the burning building, though still feeling that it was a bit thick having to get myself all charred up to gratify a kid who would be far better cooked to a cinder, when he emerged. His face was black, and he hadn't any eyebrows, but in other respects appeared reasonably bobbish. Indeed, he seemed entertained rather than alarmed by what had occurred.
"Cool,"
he said in a pleased sort of voice.
"Bit of a bust-up, wasn't it?"
I eyed him sternly. "What the dickens have you been playing at, you abysmal young louse?" I demanded. "What was that explosion?"
"That was the kitchen chimney. It was full of soot, so I shoved some gunpowder up it. But I think I may have used too much, because there was a terrific bang and everything sort of caught fire. Cool. It didn't half make me laugh."
"Why didn't you pour water on the flames?"
"I did, only it turned out to be paraffin."
I clutched the brow. I was deeply moved. It had just come home to me that this blazing pyre was the joint which was supposed to be the Wooster GHQ, and the householder spirit had awoken in me. Every impulse urged me to give the little snurge 6 of the best with a bludgeon. But you can't very well slosh a child who has just lost his eyebrows. Besides, I hadn't a bludgeon. "Well, you properly messed things up," I said.
"It didn't all work out quite the way I meant," he admitted, "but I wanted to do my last Friday's act of kindness."
At these words all was suddenly made plain to me. It was so long since I had seen the young poison sack that I had forgotten the kink in his psychology which made him such a menace to society. This Edwin, I now recalled, was one of those thorough kids who spare no effort. He had the same serious outlook on life as his sister Florence, and when he joined the Boy Scouts, he did so resolved not to shirk his responsibilities. The programme called for a daily act of kindness, and he went at it in a grave and earnest spirit. Unfortunately, what with one thing and another, he was always dropping behind schedule, and would then set such a clip to try and catch up with himself that any spot in which he happened to be functioning rapidly became a perfect hell for man and beast. It was so at the house in Shropshire where I had first met him, and it was evidently just the same now. It was with grave face and a thoughtful tooth chewing the lower lip that I picked up my coat and donned it. A weaker man, contemplating the fact that he was trapped in a locality containing not only Florence Cray, Police Constable Cheesewright, and Uncle Percy, but also Edwin doing acts of kindness, would probably have given at the knees. And I am not so sure I might not have done so myself, had not my mind been diverted by a frightful discovery, so ghastly that I uttered a hoarse cry, and all thoughts of Florence, Stilton, Uncle Percy, and Edwin were wiped from my mind. I had just remembered that my suitcase with the Sinbad the Sailor costume in it was in the wee nook front hall, and the flames leaping ever nearer. There was no hesitation, no vacillating about my movements now. When it had been a matter of risking my life to save Boy Scouts, I may have stood scratching the chin a bit, but this was different. I needed that Sinbad. Only by retrieving it would I be able to attend the fancy dress ball at East Wibley tomorrow night, the one bright spot in a dark and sticky future. Well, I suppose I could have popped up to London and got something else, but probably a mere Pierrot, and my whole heart was set on the Sinbad and the ginger whiskers. Edwin was saying something about fire brigades, and I right-hoed absently. Then, snapping into it like a jack-rabbit, I commended my soul to God and plunged in. Well, as it turned out, I needn't have worried. It is true that there was a certain amount of smoke in the hall, billowing hither and thither in murky clouds, but nothing to bother a man who had often sat to leeward of Cat's Meat Potter Purbright when he was enjoying one of those cigars of his. In a few minutes it was plain the whole place would be a cheerful blaze, but for the nonce conditions were reasonably normal. It is no story, in short, of a jolly nearly fried to a crisp Bertram Wooster that I have to tell, but rather of a Bertram Wooster who just scooped up the old suitcase, whistled a gay air, and breezed out without a mark on him. I may have coughed once or twice, but nothing more. But though peril may have failed to get off the mark inside the house, it was very strong on the wing outside. The first thing I saw as I emerged was Uncle Percy standing at the gate, and as Edwin had now vanished, presumably in search of fire brigades, I was alone with him in the great open spaces, a thing I've always barred being from the days of childhood. "Oh, hello, Uncle Percy," I said. "Good afternoon, good afternoon." A casual passer-by, hearing the words and noting the hearty voice in which they had been spoken, might have been deceived into supposing that Bertram was at his ease. Such, however, was far from being the case. Whether anyone was ever at his ease in the society of this old Gord-Elpus, I cannot say, but I definitely was not. The spine, and I do not attempt to conceal the fact, had become soluble in the last degree. You may wonder at this, arguing that as I was not responsible for the disaster which had come upon us, I had nothing to fear. But a longish experience has taught me that on these occasions innocence pays no dividends. Pure as the driven snow though he may be, or even purer, it is the man on the spot who gets the brickbats. My civil greeting elicited no response. He was staring past me at the little home, now beyond any possible doubt destined to be a total loss. Edwin might return with all the fire brigades in Hampshire, but nothing was going to prevent wee Nook winding up as a heap of ashes. "What?" he said, speaking thickly, as if the soul were bruised, as I imagine to have been the case. "What? What? What? What?" I saw that unless checked, this was going to take some time. "There's been a fire," I said. "What do you mean?" Well, I didn't see how I could have put it much clearer. "A fire," I repeated, waving a hand in the direction of the burning edifice, as much as to tell him to take a glance for himself. "How are you, Uncle Percy? You're looking fine." He wasn't, as a matter of fact, nor did this attempt to ease the strain by giving him the old oil have the desired effect. He directed at me a kind of frenzied glare, containing practically nil in the way of an uncle's love, and spoke in a sort of hollow, despairing voice. "I might have known.
My best friends would have warned me what would have come of letting a lunatic like you loose in the place. I ought to have guessed that the first thing you would do, before so much as unpacking, would be to set the whole damn premises ablaze.
Not me, I said, wishing to give credit where credit was due. Edwin.
Edwin? My son?
Yes, I know, I said sympathetically. Too bad. Yes, he's your son, all right. He's been tidying up.
You can't start a fire by tidying up.
You can if you use gunpowder.
Gunpowder?
He appears to have touched off a keg or two in the kitchen chimney to correct a disposition on its part to harbour soot. Well, I had naturally supposed, as anyone would have supposed, that this frank explanation would have set me right, causing him to dismiss me without a stain on my character, and that the rather personal note which had crept into his remarks would instantly have been switched off. What I had anticipated was that he would issue an apology for that crack of his about lunatics, which I would gracefully accept, and that we would then get together like two old buddies and shake our heads over the impulsiveness of the younger generation. Not a bit of it, however. He continued to bend upon me the accusing gaze which I had disliked so much from the start.
Why the devil did you give the boy gunpowder?
I saw that he had still got the wrong angle. I didn't give the boy gunpowder.
Only a congenital idiot would give a boy gunpowder. There's not a man in England except you who wouldn't know what would happen if you gave a boy gunpowder. Do you realize what you've done? The sole reason for your coming here was that I should have a place where I could meet an old friend and discuss certain matters of interest. And now look at it. I ask you, look at it.
Not too good, I was forced to concede, as the roof fell in, sending up a shower of sparks and causing a genial glow to play about our cheeks.
I suppose it never occurred to you to throw water on the flames.
It did to Edwin, only he used paraffin. He started, staring at me incredulously.
You tried to put the fire out with paraffin? You ought to be certified, and as soon as I collect a couple of doctors, I'll have it seen to.
What was making this conversation so difficult was, as you have probably spotted, the apparent impossibility of getting the old ass to sort out the principals in the affair and assign to each his respective role. He was one of those men you meet sometimes who only listen to about 2 words of any observation addressed to them. I suppose he had got that way through presiding at board meetings and constantly chipping in and squelching shareholders in the middle of sentences. Once more, I tried to drive it home to him that it was Edwin who had done all the what you might call heavy work, Bertram having been throughout merely an innocent bystander, but it didn't penetrate. He was left with the settled conviction that I and the child had got together, forming a quorum, and after touching off the place with gunpowder had nursed the conflagration along with careful injections of paraffin, each encouraging each, as you might say, on the principle that it is teamwork that tells. When he finally pushed off, instructing me to send Jeeves along to him the moment he arrived, he was reiterating the opinion that I ought not to be at large, and wishing, though here I definitely could not see eye to eye with him, that I was 10 years younger, so that he could have got after me with that hunting crop of his. He then withdrew, leaving me to my meditations. These, as you may suppose, were not of the juiciest. However, they didn't last long, for I don't suppose I had been meditating more than about a couple of minutes, when a wheezing, rattling sound made itself heard off stage, and there entered, left upper centre, a vehicle which could only have been a station taxi. There was luggage on it, and looking more closely, I saw Jeeves protruding from the side window. The weird old object, the cab I mean, not Jeeves, came to a halt at the gate. Jeeves paid it off, the luggage was dumped by the roadside, and he was at liberty to get into conference with the young master, not an instant too soon for the latter. I had need of his sympathy, encouragement, and advice. I also wanted to tick him off a bit for letting me in for all this.